Good evening and welcome to the miNEStry. I am Archbishop Dracul, and alongside me is Father Avram. Our creed is to inspire our parishioners with reflections on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Tonight we are reflecting on David Crane's A Boy and His Blob, Trouble on Blobolonia, a 1989 puzzle platformer developed by Imagineering and published by Absolute Entertainment in North America and published by Nintendo in Europe in 1991. Jaleco published the game in Japan also in 1991. Imagineering was also known for the releases of Ghostbusters 2. No, not the good one. The Simpsons games, and Barbie. Tonight, our visiting Deacon is once again Mr. Patrick Hickey Jr. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Patrick. Have anything going on that you want to mention to the parish?
Oh, yes, I just wanted to say I'm very happy to be a part of the congregation once again. And news of your fellowship, of your word, of your faith is reaching far corners of the interwebs as we speak. I'm very proud of the work that you guys are doing. I'm very proud of the immortal efforts that I performed on my first episode here. So with that out of the way, I just finished up serving as the phone guy in the new Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit. So that's coming out June 20th on all major consoles.
Nice.
So I'm super excited for that. Like, if you would have ever told me that, like, in a year and a half that I would be Macho Man, Randy Savage, Dracula, and the phone guy in 3 different video games, I would tell you, like, you're crazy. So there's that, and then tons of great comics from Legacy Comics, and some new chapters coming for a couple of video game anthologies that I was asked to write in. So that's how I'm spreading the faith, guys.
Fantastic.
Well, yes, we are very proud of you.
Thank you, sir.
A testament to the creators. David Crane, programming and design. David Crane is also known for Grand Prix in 1982 for the Atari 2600, Pitfall 1 and 2 in 1982 and 1984 respectively, also for the Atari 2600, Ghostbusters in 1985 for the Atari 2600, Bart vs. the Space Mutants in 1991 for the NES, and Night Trap in 1992 for the Sega CD.
We should probably mention that the last 2 entries were he was credited for programming, where the ones before that, he actually designed the games.
Sorry. Yes, I should have mentioned that.
That's okay. Don't do it again, Father Avram.
Night Trap. What a game. Pioneering, really.
Yeah,
Yes.
just some crazy good games.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Grand Prix, Pitfall 1, and Night Trap. Yeah, really, really. Those are my favorite on this list.
You're also talking David Crane's amazing tennis. He's got a couple of other really big games. One of the founding fathers of Activision, you know. So I mean, David Crane is a legit, like, founding father of modern console gaming, no doubt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Pitfall 2 is my favorite on this list.
Oh, good, so good.
Yeah, and actually, we'll talk about it a little later, but it actually, you could feel that influence in A Boy and His Blob. So, continue, Father Avram.
Gary Kitchen, programming. Also responsible for design of Keystone Capers in 1983 for the Atari 2600. Great game. I love that game. Mm-hmm. Design of Pressure Cooker for the Atari 2600 in 1983. The Simpsons Bart versus the Space Mutants in 1990 for the NES. Was in charge of design for that one. Donkey Kong in 1982 for the Atari 2600. Did programming for that. And programming for Ghoul School in 1992 for the NES.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Like Keystone Capers is like by far the best game on this list.
Gary Kitchen has easily like the biggest range in video game history. So we've got Keystone Capers, which is arguably like one of the greatest jumps in Atari 2600. Like the feeling that character gives you when it jumps is like 2 or 3 years. This is 2 or 3 years before Super Mario Brothers, and that character moves around in like a platforming type game just as good as an NES game. Like Gary Kitchen was a rock star. Just to get Donkey Kong to work on the 2600 is no small feat. And then we're talking Star Trek, Goof Troop, Super Battle Tank 1 and 2, all on the Super Nintendo. Absolute Entertainment definitely had some really good licensing deals during the Super Nintendo era. And then just Gary Kitchen and David Crane working together on an NES game is like Paul McCartney and John Lennon working together like on a song. It's so good.
Yeah. They're juggernauts.
Except I would say that I'm not a fan of Bart versus the Space Mutants.
It's hard. It is very hard.
Proceed, Father Avram.
Jesse Capelli, I think I'm saying that right, is in charge of graphics. Also responsible for Ghostbusters 2 in 1990 for the NES. Also played a role in The Simpsons, Bart vs. the Space Mutants in 1990 for the NES, and Barbie in 1991 for the NES.
I'm not a fan of those games.
Nope.
Specifically my hatred towards Ghostbusters 2.
You know, that being said, though, the graphics in Ghostbusters 2 aren't bad.
No, yeah, okay, I'll give you that.
Sad to say, I've probably played that Barbie game more than any like God-fearing man in his 40s. Thanks to my daughter, because I have like those retro consoles, and I fired up the ROM just so she could play it, and she tried. She gave it that college try, but it's just not a good platforming game at all, like at all. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's tough. I played it. Every year I play it for Extra Life, and it's definitely a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Proceed, Father Abram.
Last on the list for creators of mention for A Boy and His Blob, we have Mark Van Heck, responsible for music. Also played roles in Ghostbusters 2. Destination Earthstar in 1990. The Simpsons, Bart vs. the Space Mutants. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes in 1991 for the NES. And also Barbie as well.
Yeah, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is an interesting entry on that list. I've never played it.
It
You
is. I
got-
don't think I've seen. I don't think I've played it either. I used to watch the cartoon.
Yeah.
But
You guys
yeah.
didn't miss much.
We didn't miss much.
You didn't miss much, I promise.
I'm not really sure what you would do to make a game out of that cartoon anyway.
It's like a day and age where like that would be like a phone like app that would that would be an
Yes,
app on the phone.
I could see that. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. We found an ad, a advertisement, as we always do on the episodes of the ministry. We try to find as much marketing material as we possibly can and list it. Usually we find a commercial, but there is no commercial for this game. But we did find a magazine ad. A reading from the ad. Toss one and see what happens. Blob has come from the distant planet Blobolonia in search of an Earth boy to help him save his world. Discover his amazing appetite for jelly beans and watch as he changes shape with every flavor. Learn to use this special power to overcome even the most outrageous obstacles. Join the Blob on his famous adventure, filled with constant surprises and humorous characters. A Boy and His Blob, new for the NES. A reading from the ad. This is a pretty cool ad. In bold text, it says, "Toss one and see what happens." And there's jelly beans everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got about 6 cells of screenshots, and it starts with a blob, and then it goes basically all the way through his, or some of his, transformations. It's
What I
pretty
have
cool.
to say about this ad that I really like is that this is probably one of the only NES ads that I would say captures the essence of the game, like the most accurate that I've seen in an ad.
Oh yeah.
It's the jelly beans, the charming theme of the jelly beans. It showcases, well, we'll talk about it later, but showcases one of the best things that I think there is about the game. And then just, there's no fluff. It's just giving you screenshots that are exactly from the game. There's no manipulation of the screenshots or anything like that, which you do see in a lot of ads.
Oh yeah, it's not a Punisher ad for NES,
Right.
Mhm.
It's actually accurate. It's a really cool ad.
You could tell too. It's definitely sized for a comic book. So it's like as a comic book publisher, I'm just like, oh, I miss when there were like ads like this in comic books because I read comics now, and there are no like decent video game ads in any comic books now, and this is just like, this is beautiful. This is beautiful.
Yeah, that's sad. That's sad that video games have like basically completely put all their marketing efforts, seems to be like only online these days, and that's it.
YouTube.
Yep. Yeah, it's totally changed. It is sad.
Let us now discuss the 7 categories for which we execute judgment on A Boy and His Blob. Category 1 is the narrative.
A reading from the manual. Look, he likes them. Likes them. The boy's blob loves them. Jelly beans, that is, in every flavor under the subway, like vanilla, apple, tangerine, cinnamon, cola, coconut, and more. Like many boys in the 21st century, the boy has a buddy from outer space. This one's from Blobolonia, a place where an evil emperor makes everyone eat only marshmallows and chocolate. In fact, for the emperor, healthy things like vitamins are poisonous. Blob, his full name Blobert, came to Earth looking for someone to help him defeat the evil emperor. That's how he met the boy. To defeat the evil emperor, the boy and Blob will need a godly supply of vitamins. And to get the vitamins, they'll need money. To get money, they'll search the underground caverns for hidden treasures and diamond stones. So what's a boy to do? Just whistle. That'll call Blob. Then feed him jelly beans. You see, the boy miraculously discovered that not only does Blob love jelly beans, but different flavored jelly beans turn Blob into different shapes. And that those shapes can be used to get through many otherwise impossible situations. With his repertoire of shapes, Blob can help the boy overcome even the most outrageous obstacles, as long as Blob gets the right flavored bean. In fact, with enough jelly beans and enough flavors, anything is possible. This is a reading from the manual.
What's interesting about this story is that it's not much of a story. It's more of like an instruction manual.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's not much like of a story here, but that was pretty common back then, I'd say. So I can't really knock it too hard.
I mean, it's definitely more of a story than the 2600 games that they worked on before that had virtually a 3-line story. You know, the guy's robbing the bank, and the guy's robbing the bank, so we just have to escape the bank in Keystone Capers, or in like Pitfall, it's like help Pitfall Harry escape. You know, da 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 da. It's like 1 or 2 line stories. This actually has, you know, a villain and this and that. You know, so I mean, by terms of today, it's nothing. It's basura, but back then, I mean, it's definitely like of par for the course, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do understand that this story is a little later, or I should say, this game is a little later in the history of Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
However, I feel like this also kind of, if you can think back to the era, like they're still riding on the tails of, you know, the alien craze of the 80s here, where, you know, every, you know, even like the first thing it reminds me of is kind of like, this is going 10 years back from the date of release here of the game, but E.T., right? Like, you know, you're a kid, you have a companion that's an alien. I mean, this just kind of appeals on that level, and it's kind of enough said. Like, you don't really need a whole fleshed out, you know, narrative to make that story sell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I gotta say that story like hits me in my heartstrings. Like that, like all I wanted as a kid was to be visited by E.T.
Exactly.
And like
exactly.
it totally like it totally hit the right note, and here you can actually have that sort of an experience.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm and you know, E.T. with E.T. what the candy that they gave E.T. was
Reese's Pieces.
The Reese's Pieces, right? So it's like there's things that definitely, to me, just they vibe together for sure.
Yep. Let us proceed to category 2, which is audio.
Oh man!
For me personally, I didn't like the audio of this game.
I'm with you.
It was kind of grating. Although there is one tune in the subway that is kind of catchy that they actually brought back in the Majesco. Is it Majesco, the remake that
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they brought that back for that remake, and it obviously sounded a hell of a lot better. But the point is that the music stood the test of time. That particular soundtrack.
I mean, yeah, the music I feel was definitely lacking. But remember, this is the whole audio category, and as far as sound design is concerned, I feel like the sound design in this game is so comprehensive. Like, there's sounds for literally everything, and and they're not necessarily recycled sounds either, which is, kind of impressive. It all plays into weaving the atmosphere of this game.
That's why it's kind of so hard to dog the soundtrack, because there's definitely like that legit try to make it stand out, but there's nothing here that like will really, again, like you guys nailed it as far as like the subway tune, that you'll remember in a positive way. It's just it's more like just like filler. There's like no earwigs. You couldn't just
Right.
you couldn't sneak any of this on an elevator and start tapping your foot to it. Where there's a ton of great NES games that have soundtracks that you're just like, put that on right now over anything that's on the radio right now. They don't have that now.
Totally.
Let us proceed to category 3, which is gameplay.
A reading from the manual. 14 fabulous flavors. You'll start the game with 12 jelly bean flavors, and throughout your adventure you'll be able to pick up a couple more. In the beginning, you'll have to experiment to see what shape each flavor makes, but you'll quickly find you have them memorized. Because each flavor name corresponds somehow to the shape it creates, either in the sound of the word or in its meaning. Here's a list of flavors you'll find. If you like, make a list and jot down the shapes formed next to each flavor. Licorice, apple, ketchup, strawberry, vanilla, grape, coconut, tangerine, punch, cola, root beer, orange, cinnamon, honey, and lime. There is one jelly bean flavor that Blob detests: ketchup. In fact, if he accidentally ate one, he'd be petrified. This is a reading from the manual.
So that last thing you said is strange, because the ketchup thing, and we're gonna do a reading from Patrick's book, The Minds Behind the Games, about the ketchup jelly bean. We heard from a contact inside Nintendo that A Boy and His Blob was the favorite game inside Nintendo of all the Christmas games that year. It was played and discussed in the halls and at the water coolers. That went right up to the top echelons. Great, right? Unfortunately, one of the top executives lost the Blob while playing. Although this is difficult to do, you can lose him. If you leave him behind and fail to whistle him back, he could get lost. So in September, that executive rejected the game unless I could fix that. I was given 1 day to fix it or miss Christmas. To solve this problem, I created a ketchup-flavored jelly bean. If you toss a ketchup jelly bean to the ground, the Blob would catch up to you. But in order to fit that new functionality into the ROM, the ketchup jelly bean had to replace another flavor. That flavor was grape, and was programmed to turn the Blob into a wall. Grape Wall, being a play on the Great Wall. I added code to make the Blob refuse to eat the grape jelly bean, so it would just fall to the ground rather than be eaten. But to this day, there is some combination of moves that can get the Blob to eat the ketchup jelly bean and turn into a brick wall. David Crane, The Minds Behind the Games by Patrick Hickey Jr. But what I found interesting is that Blob detests ketchup, but you need ketchup to make sure he doesn't get stuck in the game.
Right. Yeah, it's a contradictory statement because ketchup is the only thing that will immediately attract him to you, right? So it's like, that's weird.
And I gotta say too, like I gotta say, I absolutely, at its core, I like mechanics aside and things like that. I absolutely love the concept of this game. And it took me a while to come around to it but once I played the Majesco remake and they, presented it in such a way to where you didn't have to memorize all the jelly beans, the game like completely became a double thumbs up for me. But like in the NES version, you literally have to memorize this entire list of jelly beans. That's a drawback for me, because I don't have a good memory. I'm getting old, Father Avram.
Soon I will take his position. What? Anyway, no, I think, just reading all the flavors, I'm like, is this Willy Wonka? Like, it's jelly bellies. If I could name drop, it's, all these interesting flavors, that, may not have been popular,
True.
at the time.
And the thing, too, we should probably mention is what some of these actually are, because up to this point, it's only been designated as shapes.
Right.
So, like, for instance, when they say, you'll be able to figure out, you'll be able to memorize it because of play with words. So, licorice is a ladder. They both start with L. Apple is Jack. Applejack. Strawberry is bridge. I don't know where the hell that came from. Vanilla umbrella sounds alike. Now, grape is another one that's interesting.
Like the grape wall,
The grape wall. Why don't you you mind speaking on that, Patrick?
They just so this is the thing. This game, we haven't even touched on it yet. This game was designed in about 6 weeks, which is insane.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is insane. So you got like 4 people. Well, you've got mainly 2 people because music And the other credit on here. Hold on, I'm just going back up. You've got you've got Jesse doing graphics, and you've got Mark doing music, but you've got David Crane and Gary Kitchen essentially designing two completely different games and combining them in record time, because the game needs to come out like before like Thanksgiving, so this way it could be on store shelves for after Thanksgiving and make a ton of money for Christmas. So that's kind of the reason why some of this stuff you're just like, what, the grape wool? What, like if you were working a 20-hour day for 6 weeks, cinnamon would sound incredibly similar to blowtorch. You know, like root beer rocket, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And it's just like yeah, some of this stuff, I mean, looking back, probably, you know, was done as quickly as possible. And then there's some like some connections to some Saturday morning cartoons in the story. So like oh my god, I just forgot the Saturday, like the Herculoids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that's where the Blob comes from. Like what are the names of those two little guys that hang around them? Bleep and Blurp or something like that, you know?
Yeah, something like that.
And so it's just like they knew they wanted to make a platformer, and then they conjured up this story. And then this is the thing too. The NES should not be able to run this game. There is like way too much stuff going on under the hood. There's way too many options. Like you can easily, the average person will play this game and just get completely, utterly lost because they're like, well, I'm throwing a jelly button and this thing is eating it. And the graphics are really cool. The animations are really cool, but it's just like, if you didn't take the time to like really understand everything that was going on, you could get completely, utterly lost in this game.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I did get lost.
I got lost too, and you know,
and then
but like I said, it's like, yeah, that's right. And but I'll say it again. I absolutely adore the concept of this game.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that was the thing too. Like, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, just to kind of be devil's advocate here, the other side of this though is, the learning curve for this game is surprisingly steep, because although the gameplay mechanics are simple, right? It's kind of like you're not entirely sure what to do at first. You know, I found myself using the root beer rocket right away because I was experimenting with the jelly beans.
Yeah, I did the same
which kids,
thing.
you should never do that. I'm kidding. But you know, so you end up in Blobolonia when you do that, and and the only reason I knew that is because I had to go and look at a walkthrough, and they're like, "Oh, that takes you to Blobolonia," and I'm like, "Oh, and then like Blobolonia is like this horrible, nightmarish difficulty, especially when you first enter the game." So you're like, so I spent, I don't know, a good hour probably, like just walking around, like not really understanding everything that I needed to do. And although the manual does say like you're supposed to go and find the treasures, right? Like I'm thinking to myself, I immediately get the sense of this map is 10 times larger than I care to think about at the moment. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of like, how am I supposed to, like, this is god awful. How am I supposed to keep track of where I am and where I'm supposed to go? And it's a trial and error nightmare, really.
The thing too is David Crane has a history of stuff like this, because Pitfall, for example, was heralded for how many screens it was, that it was the biggest like Atari 2600 game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and then the thing is too, you could easily get lost in Pitfall too, or just be like, where am I going? You know? And So I think that's just like in the nature of his design that he likes to make these really big games that reward intelligence. Because this is the thing too. I remember he told me a story one time. It was him and Steve Cartwright who did Megalomania on Atari 2600, which is a really fun shooter. And they're just sitting around, and David Crane just goes to him and is like, "Do you know that there's probably only like 40 of us?" And Steve is like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "There's probably only like 40 of us that like actually make games." Like, think about it. Like, that's the
crazy
world that they were living in at that time. And the thing is, so you're talking, they would memorize all of their assembly language, all of the code for their games on Atari 2600. Those guys were capable of memorizing every line of code, just in case something happened to the computer or whatever, and that they would be able to just punch it all back in and get it back. So I'm sure that David Crane and Gary Kitchen had no problem playing these games. But, you know, little 8-year-old, 9-year-old Pat and Deacon and you know, I mean, the game just didn't affect us the same way, you know?
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Pitfall, it's very reminiscent of Pitfall 2 for me.
Sure.
Which makes sense, you know. It's also reminiscent of one of the Simpsons games, with elements of later games like Out of This World or Another World.
Some Prince of Persia, some Blackthorn, some Flashback, like, you know.
Yeah, it definitely falls into the genre of, you know, explorer puzzle. You know, the first thing I thought of was Out of This World. When I played it, I was like, man, and I love Out of This World. I think it's just such a charming game. But, you know, this was like, man, I'm playing an ancestor of Out of This World. Like that's after I kind of got my bearings, like that came to mind, and that was a very easy association to make.
It just sadly makes the game more niche than you know, consumer commercial friendly, which is sad because a ton of work went into this one.
Yeah,
no doubt. Yeah, no doubt at all. Kudos to them for getting this amount of gameplay and consistency out in, you know, whatever it was, 6 or 12 weeks or 8 weeks, you know, in total.
So this is the thing too. A lot of people don't know, but like this whole inventory system in the game doesn't exist on the NES. These guys actually created that inventory system for this game alone. So they not only designed the game, but they designed like the hard, essentially like the whole back end of the engine. So this way it would be able to support, the NES should not be able to support something like this. And that's where I think Gary Kitchen comes into play, because no one wanted to do that Donkey Kong 2600 port because they didn't think that they could get Donkey Kong to work on the 2600. And even though Gary Kitchen's Donkey Kong does not look great, it absolutely plays like Donkey Kong. So, you know, you've got two amazing developers really doing great work in a short amount of time on this one.
Yeah, the turnaround is insane. All right, let us proceed to category 4, which is graphics. The Blob is awesome. The Blob is awesome. He looks like a snowman.
Mm-hmm.
And the BG art is painterly.
Mm-hmm.
Really well done. By comparison, the Subway art felt a little unpolished, but the other aspects made it really make up for it.
Yeah, my thoughts on the graphics in this are that the background art is really stunning. When I first saw the trees, the forest, not the forest, but the trees with the fields in the background and the mountain, I was like, what? I have never seen anything like this on the NES. Like, the background art is just stunning. It's painterly. It's a great way of saying it. It really does look like you're looking at an 8-bit painting. Like somebody just took a painting right off the museum, ran it through a pixel filter. You know what I mean? Like it's just very good. In contrast, I kind of feel like some of the other graphics are very much kind of like they're like programmer art. It's not the same level of polish does not carry from background to foreground at all, and that was a little bit off-putting for me because I immediately felt, man, if they had just maybe spread their effort a little bit more evenly, maybe it would be a little bit more of a consistent feel. That being said, I think the blob is a great representation of a blob. But even like the animations and stuff for the blob, like it all makes sense, right? And all the things that the blob can turn into, like, oh, it's crazy. Like really solid effort there. But everything else, like the boy, like I've never seen a main character be ignored in contrast to the other artwork like this game has ignored the main character. It's just it was off-putting to me.
Yeah, I could see that. The blob is awesome, though.
The blob is definitely awesome for sure.
I mean, at the end of the day, the name of this game should be The Blob and some dude that throws jelly beans, because it's just like that's where your eye goes. I love the animations for the blob too, and the transformations. I think are totally ahead of their time.
Yep.
On the NES, they're really cool.
Yeah.
There's a sense of satisfaction when you finally figure out like what jelly bean you're supposed to throw and at what time.
Yep.
So I think that's like the deal breaker for me. But yeah, like this boy he's literally a boy. There's nothing special about him. He's just a boy.
Yeah, like he has no name.
Yeah.
It's just a boy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is his name, a boy.
Yep. So Blobbert, but Blobbert's the man. He's pretty awesome. So,
yeah.
So I'm down with that.
Yeah, it really should have been, I guess, Blobbert and his boy.
Yeah.
Or the adventures of Blobbert and his boy.
Let us proceed to category 5, which is box art and presentation. A reading from the back of the box. We include the readings for the back of the box because a lot of times that was all we had back then. Blob has come from the distant planet of Blobolonia in search of an Earth boy to help him save his world. Join him on this fantastic adventure in mysterious caverns beneath the Earth, searching for treasures. Then travel to Blobolonia to battle the evil Emperor. Discover Blob's amazing appetite for jelly beans and the different transformations that occur with each flavor. Learn to use these shapes to overcome even the most outrageous obstacles. A Boy and His Blob is a fantastic journey filled with constant surprises and humorous characters. A reading from the back of the box. I like the box art. Like, some of the perspectives are weird in the panels, but like I like the box art, and I think the back of the box is nice too, because it again it shows you, it gives you 4 screenshots to look at,
which is a lot for an NES game. You know?
Yeah, and you've got different states of blobber in each one.
I like the logo design. I like the cover reminds me of a comic book. It reminds me of like an old school like comic book / like young adult story. Like this could easily, like for me, be like the cover of like an Encyclopedia Brown book. You know, it's just very warm. It's very warm. It's very inviting. But then the thing is too, Activision, Absolute, all these guys, Kitchen, Crane, they worked with licenses before. So they knew how to like present a game in a way where it would be appetizing on a shelf in a store. And I mean, so this is the thing. In order for this game to break even, they needed to sell 50,000 copies. They sold 210,000 copies. So
wow.
This was a massive success on like, because I mean they're essentially an indie developer at this point, you know. So figure, I mean, how much this game was back in the day, like $50-$60, 200 and you know 10,000 copies. That's, I mean, this basically made their studio and made a lot of the other games that they did after that like possible. So of course it helped that they had the Simpsons and Ghostbusters and all that stuff before, but this was an original IP. This was a different project for them. And they really knocked this one out of the park. And I think the box art has a lot to do with that, because back in the day, that's what you had. That's all you had. There wasn't YouTube. There wasn't, you know, do an AMA with the developers on Discord and things like that. There was no Kickstarter. So, I mean, they really delivered in all of the places where they had to, which was the box art and those little advertising campaigns that they went on.
Yeah, I also like the box. I think the comic book feel on the front, it just hits the nail on the head. For me, because it's what I grew up with, it immediately reminded me of Mighty Max.
Wow!
That same style. A little bit different, a little bit older because it was older, but
sure.
but same idea, right? So and the back of the box too is very simple, featuring the screenshots again that haven't been tampered with. It's a very simple, appealing box.
It's like if this game was a woman on a dating website, you'd want to date her, because it's just the lighting, everything is perfect. There's nothing like, how many times have you guys seen box art for PS4 or PS5, Nintendo Switch games, and there's no box art in the back, but there's just like badass cover art, and you're just like, yeah, something's going on here. It's just like all of the warts, everything that like this game is all like there. This game is like, just its arms are wide open and are like, this is what we are. Come travel with us to Blobolonia to battle the evil emperor. Like, let's go. Come on a trip with us. Like, it's such an earnest, honest like attempt to like get a gamer to play.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, let us proceed to category 6, which is fun factor. Now, for me, the fun factor is, it's kind of skewed in a way, because the NES version frustrated me, but the remake by Majesco, I adore. So it's like I'm kind of in this weird mishmash of areas, because I think in some certain circumstances, this game works.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there was maybe not enough time or something to where, you know, like for instance, like going back to having to memorize all the jelly beans, like that was something that frustrated me. But the thing that Majesco did to fix that and way forward, they only gave jelly beans that you needed at any given time on any given board.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave visual representation of what it is that you're choosing, what the jelly bean actually is. And
I hear you, Archbishop, but remember, at the end of the day, we're passing judgment on the NES card.
yes. Well, the memorization of the jelly beans frustrated me.
That frustrated me, as well as knowing like when you had to just faith jump. Like trying to keep track of like, oh, I'm over this screen now. This is where I'm supposed to fall off the ledge. That was extremely hard to figure out and felt more
scary.
like a stroke of luck than anything else.
The other thing that really frustrated me was the stalactites with the bubble in the water.
Oh yeah.
It felt like you would pop like nothing. Like it would take no resistance whatsoever to get you to pop, and then you're dead.
So funny story. Archbishop Dracul and I played this together while I was visiting him, and we got to the part where we were underwater with the bubble, and we see the treasure in the middle of the stalactites and or stalagmites from the bottom, and I'm like, how the hell are you supposed to get that? And he's like this, and he just propels full speed into the sharp edges of the stone, screaming expletives at the top of his lungs while doing so.
Blasphemous. Oh man.
Needless to say, he failed miserably.
See, for me, in spite of that, because I've been there too. I've been there where there's sometimes it's just like an episode of Family Guy. It's just like there are parts in the game that feel so like barren and void of life, where you're just like, can somebody throw a pie already? Like, what am I supposed to do? I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. But when you finally figure stuff out, it's so much fun. When you start to realize, oh my god, that's what I'm supposed to do. Yes, and you get it. The problem is just like this game requires you to be of a certain intelligence. It requires you to use logic. It requires you to do things that the average gamer cannot do. And I feel like the Wii version just like dumbed it down and then adds these beautiful anime manga-esque graphics that just, it's the best of both worlds. It captures everything that the original was trying to do and then just makes it really pretty and dumbs it down. But it's just like what this game was able to do in 6 weeks, visually, and then the animations I think are fantastic. But then again too, when everything works, it's so freaking cool, and it can be incredibly fun. But when it's not fun at all, to the point where you're just like, all right, I'm just going to play RBI Baseball or Contra.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the to piggyback on that, I'd say also the thing that this game requires is once you learn the thing that you're supposed to do for a certain area, you have to memorize it, and you have to be willing to go through the whole game all over again, until you get to the next part where you're like, okay, what do I do now? And you potentially will have to go through this many times. It is a game of perseverance. more so than other games of skill. That's not the type of perseverance I'm talking about here. I'm talking about it is like rote memory perseverance. Like if I were to describe how to play this game, it would be pull out your rote memory skills and persevere. And I have to say, because of that, although I liked the puzzle parts of it, I liked figuring stuff out. It was satisfying when stuff was figured out. I really didn't have a whole lot of fun doing this. But I appreciated the game for what it was. But again, fun factor for me, it didn't really hit it. It hit it when I solved a puzzle. Like you said, it's like so satisfying when you're like, oh man, I need to use the strawberry here, of course, to get across of course. But there's so many red herrings in this game too, where it's like you think you've done something right, but you might not have. It may look like you did something right, but you may have done it in the wrong order and just screwed yourself from getting one of the treasures. So it's like it can be very frustrating to play this game cold without any walkthrough or guidance,
which is extremely off-putting for many people playing the NES, because the NES was one of those consoles that so many American families they were able to just jump in and learn gameplay mechanics right away. This is a game that I see a lot of dads playing this when their kids were asleep. That this wasn't like the game that like little kids were playing on Saturday morning, or the game that kids were running home from school to play at 3:00. This was a game that like your dad really wanted to play, or like your older teenager that wanted something different on the NES was playing.
Yeah. It wasn't a button masher. It wasn't an action game. It's literally a thinker. And not only that, it can be a slog. And you really need to be willing to, like, if you're going to go in cold without looking up a map online or a walkthrough online, if you're going to go through this cold, which if you do that, by the way, if you go through the walkthrough, be prepared to suck any fun that you may have had out of the game, because half of the fun of the game is actually figuring stuff out. But if you're going to go in cold, pull out a map, take like, I don't know, make like comic book style squares and take notes for each one of the screens. Like that would be my way of doing this again if I were to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that doing the graph paper approach would be helpful for sure if you didn't have a walkthrough.
Yep.
It's just one of those games where it's just like, it reminds me very much of, like, you guys nailed it before with Outer Worlds, and Blackthorn and Flashback, and even the Immortal, where it's just like, if it's your cup of tea, it does something special to you. But if not, it's just going to be one of those games where you're just like, yeah, it had cool box art and some cool animations, but I got bored of it pretty quick.
Very much so, yes.
If I remember, that was the Immortal for me.
And I loved the Immortal. I really did. I had fun with the Immortal. But,
both incredibly ahead of their time.
It was, for me, what really killed the fun for me was not figuring out which jelly bean to use where. It wasn't like, it wasn't even where to go. It was where to fall. That is the thing that killed this game for me. The fun factor for this game was knowing where to fall. Like that Oh, that is so aggravating to me because it's like when you fall, there's no easy way to get back up, and you only have a certain number of jelly beans, and you don't really know if you fell in the right place, and it's just, ugh, that just killed it for me. It became very overwhelming and hard to digest real quickly.
Absolutely.
All right, let us proceed to category 7, which is technical. I think this game is a technical marvel.
Agreed.
100%. 100%. It is amazing what they were able to put onto this cartridge in 6 weeks. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, there's really no other thing to say other than that. I mean, although I would like Patrick to tell us a little bit about the ketchup jelly bean, because I feel like that does fall into this category. And since you wrote about it so well in your book, The Mind Behind the Games, or The Minds Behind the Games, which if you don't have that book, go get a copy. It's a great interview, a book of interviews with the developers, and Patrick has a whole series of them. So very cool. But in this chapter, he mentions or goes into explanation about the ketchup jelly bean and why it even exists in the first place. Why don't you take it away there, Patrick?
Sure. They finished the game in time, which is crazy that they actually finished this insane game that shouldn't even work on the NES on time. And Nintendo absolutely adores it. Like, they're playing it at Nintendo of America at the Nintendo headquarters, and they are loving it. But then a high-ranking Nintendo executive keeps losing his blob. And is like, you guys cannot release this game unless you can fix this bug. And they basically had like a day to like fix it. And David Crane ended up figuring it out, and they decided to go with the ketchup jelly bean, so it would force your Blobert to catch up to you. And they were able to send in the updated ROM and get the game released on time. I mean, now you could say, "Oh, I'll send you a Dropbox," and da da da. This is before like the internet and stuff like that. This is insane. This is insane that stuff like this even happened, and that this game should not have been released at all because of that. And they were like, "Nope, we'll fix it," and they fixed it like in record time. And again, it just goes back to like the theme of that chapter in The Minds Behind the Games is just that like Gary Kitchen and David Crane were two of the best in the world at that time. And they just delivered. And again, too, it's not the most fun game. We said this, but like what it's able to do, it set the tone for so many games that had like bigger intentions than the NES could offer. I feel like that this is probably better suited to be a PC game than an NES game, but it found its way on the NES. And again, 210,000 copies. It's a success, you know. And like you guys said, technically speaking, it does things that no NES game at the time does, and it does them reasonably well. It just like, again, the level design is a little wonky, and it's not the most intuitive, and that hurts the fun factor and stuff. But it's got so many other things going for it, and I think the biggest thing that it had going for it was David Crane and Gary Kitchen wanting to make sure that it got out. And sadly, I mean, I briefly discussed this in the chapter, but there were plans on like a Saturday morning cartoon, on a toy line. They had Hasbro like on the line. They were like getting ready to sign something with Hasbro, and you know, sometimes in business, you know, things don't happen. And in the case of Boy and His Blob, like it didn't get it didn't get that world renowned, effort that it wanted. But I mean, luckily we got the remake in like 2006 and stuff like that, so that was great. But again, it all goes back to how David Crane and Gary Kitchen would not give up, and they basically worked 20-hour days for 6 weeks to get this game out.
Yeah, it's crazy. I agree with Archbishop that yes, it's a technical marvel, and it's funny that there are bugs, right? And I think the blob or losing your blob is a bug that they came up with a game mechanic as a workaround. It doesn't fix the bug. It's just a workaround. And self-admittedly, when Archbishop and I were playing this, we hadn't read the manual yet, and we were playing it, and we lost the blob. And I will never forget Dracul saying, "This game is broken."
Yeah. Again, we didn't read the manual yet, so we had no idea. And we never made that connection that the ketchup was actually, hey, ketchup,
Yeah, it's just a total interesting workaround to and I think they, if I remember correctly, in your book there, Deacon Hickey, I think that you mentioned in there that like there were several or a couple unused jelly beans, and so they basically used one of those slots as the ketchup jelly bean. So
as luck would have it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's really interesting stuff. Technical marvel for sure.
Let us proclaim the hints and cheats of our game.
In the manual, there are cheats, but they're indecipherable because they use a font on half the page that looks like charred, like charcoal. So you can't really make out what it says.
All garbled, yeah.
Which is too bad because it could have been helpful.
And now, brethren, let us offer each other the body of price. A Boy and His Blob went for $34.95 in 1989, which is worth $82.98 in today's money. Pretty amazing to think about that inflation there, but if anything, this just flies in the face of people who say that they pay too much for new video games. Because if you were to actually pay the right price for a new video game, you'd be paying close to $100 for that video game today. But according to PriceCharting.com, you can still get this game. A loose copy for $11.31 is what it will set you back. The box only is $26.24, which is actually a little higher than I would have thought for this box, but still not a bad price. Manual only $13.75, again a little high on that, I'd say. Complete in box $54.95, totally reasonable. But brand new, never been opened, $392. I would have expected that to be more.
Yeah, I would have too. $392 would have been that's
interesting because a lot of the carts that we see are lower than this. Like the individual prices here are higher. Like the manual, the box, and the cart. They're higher than some of the other things that we've seen, but some of the other ones, although the individual opened things are lower, you have this exorbitant sealed price. But this one is kind of the other way around. It's kind of strange.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting how the manual is worth more than the game itself.
And maybe it has something to do with the fact that like it's really an indie game, and like it sold, like I said, the 210,000 copies. But I mean, how many of these games do you think they really made? I don't think they made that many. Yeah. It kind of goes to what's going on now. If you're a PS2 collector, a lot of these Capcom games that weren't very expensive, like Onimusha, like 1, 2, and 3 are, $80-$90 in some stores, and it's just like, why? And it's just like because there wasn't a lot of them made, which is pretty wild. So I think maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, but to my point though, right? Like if they hadn't made a whole lot of them, like sure, like the individual open prices would be higher for sure, right? Because there aren't as many going around. But I would also expect the brand new sealed to be a lot higher.
Considering I thought you were saying the opposite. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying that.
No, I'm saying that the open stuff, like the loose cart, the box only, the manual only, is just a little bit higher than what we sometimes see on this series. But then the new price is a little lower than what we see, and
weird.
So it's a little strange.
No, I agree. I'm sorry, I misheard you.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's definitely. I'd say that you're totally right. I mean, the market for sealed copies of games isn't as broad as open games that people like to actually take out and play, right? So, I'm sure that has something to do with it as well.
Let us now execute judgment upon Boy and His Blob and decide which of the 7 cardinal sins it has committed. Father Avram, in regards to narrative, what is your final judgment?
In regards to narrative, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to narrative, what is your final judgment?
In regards to narrative, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
In regards to narrative and in the presence of this assembly, A Boy and His Blob has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to audio, what is your final judgment?
I am so on the fence with this one, but I need to make my decision. In regards to audio, A Boy and His Blob has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to audio, what is your final judgment?
In regards to audio, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault. It's not Duck Hunt. It's better than Duck Hunt.
It's down to me. In regards to audio and in the presence of this assembly, A Boy and His Blob has been spared.
Oh.
Hallelujah.
Father Avram, in regards to gameplay, what is your final judgment?
In regards to gameplay, A Boy and His Blob has committed a most heinous cardinal sin. It pains me. This hurts, Archbishop. It hurts.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to gameplay, what is your final judgment?
In regards to gameplay, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
In regards to gameplay and in the presence of this assembly, A Boy and His Blob has committed a loathsome cardinal sin deserving of hellfire and damnation.
Oh boy.
1.
Father Avram, in regards to graphics, what is your final judgment?
In regards to graphics, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to graphics, what is your final judgment?
In regards to graphics, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
In regards to graphics and in the presence of this assembly, A Boy and His Blob has been spared.
I invoke the talisman of absolution.
For what?
For graphics.
Father Avram, in regards to box art and presentation, what is your final judgment?
In regards to box art and presentation, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to box art and presentation, what is your final judgment?
In regards to box art and presentation, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
In regards to box art and presentation and in the presence of this assembly, A Boy and His Blob has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to fun factor, what is your final judgment?
In regards to fun factor, A Boy and His Blob has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to fun factor, what is your final judgment?
In regards to fun factor, A Boy and His Blob has committed oh my god. A Boy and His Blob has committed a most heinous cardinal sin.
In regards to fun factor, and in the presence of this assembly, A Boy and His Blob has committed a loathsome cardinal sin deserving of hellfire and damnation.
2. I invoke the talisman of damnation.
Really?
Yes,
For what, audio?
for fun factor.
Oh.
Well, it's only a formal protest.
Oh, okay. I thought he was getting me back for the audio thing.
Father Avram, in regards to technical, what is your final judgment?
In regards to technical, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
Deacon Hickey, in regards to technical, what is your final judgment?
In regards to technical, A Boy and His Blob has committed no fault.
In regards to technical and in the presence of this assembly, A Boy and His Blob has been spared. Blob, by the authority vested in me, we redeem you of any faults which you have committed, and hereby revere you as a jewel in the crown of the Nintendo Entertainment System. This concludes tonight's service. Remember, our liturgy does not simply come to an end. Those assembled are sent forth to bring the fruits of the ministry to the world.